Prisoners are from Europe, the Middle East and North Africa. In many cases, they're being held along with their families at the camp in Idlib province. Some are being returned home with the cooperation of foreign security services. The number of foreign fighters who've joined IS isn't clear, but it's believed up to 4,000 people have gone from Europe to fight in Syria and Iraq. Two-thirds of them come from France, Britain, Germany and Belgium. The Centre for Counter-Terrorism suggests that 30% are suspected to have returned to their countries of origin. From Istanbul, Quentin Somerville reports.
Where do jihadists go when their beloved Islamic State starts to crumble? Some are being held here at a secret camp in northern Syria. The men are from Europe, across the Middle East and Central Asia. They're defectors and prisoners of war, so few want to show their faces. In retreat, many have brought their families with them. In the headscarf is Abu Sumail. He joined the so-called Islamic State from Holland. Now a captive, he renounces the group.
They use people like human meat. You give your life to them, so they're going to start to take control of your life. I know I will get into trouble, but this is what I choose, and I will pay the price. I hope I can get out soon and live my life normally.
These are Egyptians, Tunisians, Holland. The camp is run by the rebel group Jaish al-Tahrir. Its commander showed me the details of dozens of prisoners. Some will be returned to Europe if the authorities promise to jail them, but others will face Syrian justice.
We refer them to courts and they rule according to the gravity of their crimes. If they had committed murder, then they might be executed. Some are jailed just because they still hold this wrongful ideology.
The Islamic State's core is collapsing. They're losing territory and an increasing number of people are attempting to defect. Joining IS was relatively easy, but leaving is difficult. It was hard, really hard, says this defector who was held at the camp. All of the borders have now closed. He's now left Syria. We've also learned that European intelligence agencies are on a mission in northern Syria to find, capture and return IS supporters. They're working alongside some rebel groups to create a kind of underground railroad which will bring IS group supporters home to face justice. For now, they're held in Syria, but these European jihadists want to come back. It will be a dangerous homecoming. Quentin Somerville, BBC News, Istanbul.
Russia and the US are to start talking about the war in Syria again after last month's bitter breakdown after the US accused Russia of bombing an aid convoy. Before this new meeting was announced, President Putin blamed Washington for the collapse in relations. Meanwhile, an airstrike on one of the main markets in the rebel-held east of Aleppo is reported to have killed at least 15 people. Rescue workers say women and children are among the casualties. There had been a brief lull in the strikes by Syrian government and Russian warplanes, but they started again on Tuesday when around 50 people were killed. Lawyers for the only surviving suspect in the Islamist terror attacks in Paris last November have said they will no longer defend him. Salah Abdeslam's been held in solitary confinement since he was captured earlier this year. His lawyer said he doesn't wish to talk and has rejected a legal defence. They also said the constant 24-hour surveillance had caused their client to clam up and that they were left with no choice but to step back.
We know, we are convinced, and he told us himself that he will not speak and he'll enact his right to remain silent. In our position, what would you have us do? We've already made clear, I told you from the first day that if my client remains silent, if the client remains silent, we will stop defending him.
Now, there are calls in Germany to honour 2 Syrian refugees who overpowered a bomb plot suspect with possible links to so-called Islamic State. The 2 Syrians gave shelter to a fellow Syrian asylum seeker, Jabbar al-Bakr, but then recognised him as the target of a nationwide manhunt and overpowered him before tying him up and calling the police. One of the men has spoken to German television about why they handed him over.
I don't want something like this to happen in this country. No one welcomes Syrians like they do in this country. We respect this country and its people, its government and its laws. We don't want something like this to happen here. He tried to bribe us with money so that we would release him. We told him it doesn't matter how much he pays. We won't release him.
Well, Björn Stritzel is a reporter who's been covering the story for Germany's Bild newspaper. Björn, thank you for talking to us. Just tell us a little about the story. You've been reporting on how Syrians in Germany got involved in the search for this man.
Yeah, well, when news came out that that Jabbar al-Bakr, the suspect in this case, that he's on the run and that that police is looking for him, I got to Facebook. And I have a lot of Syrian friends there. So I checked my Facebook and I see immediately lots of messages popping up. Syrians were taking to Facebook to call on their fellow Syrians to find the guy, to hunt him down, to assist the police. There were a lot of calls for him in his private messages, but also a lot of in the big Facebook groups. Syrians are very organized through social media, through Facebook, and they were calling on whenever you see this guy, call the police and assist the police, because he might be an ISIS terrorist. He might conduct a terrorist attack.
Yeah, and in the end, this man was handed over to police. There are now calls in Germany for them to be rewarded in some way. I know your newspaper's been reporting on it. They're calling them Syrian heroes, refugee heroes. How big is the appetite for them to get some kind of reward for what they've done?
Well, there are already some calls from politicians to reward the Syrians who overpowered him, who tied him up, who handed him over to the police. Of course, it will take some time because the authorities have to investigate the case. They have to see all the details under whatever recognition will come out of this. But yeah, we call them heroes, refugees, not just because they tied him up, but also we wanted to show the tremendous efforts that many Syrians in Germany were taking. Like it was like a joint effort of many Syrians who posted in these Facebook groups, who called for arresting this terrorist. And it was these efforts that the Syrians who were with the terrorist got aware of who he actually is. So it was like a joint effort. And I spoke to one Syrian activist. He's an ISIS activist. His name is Abdulaziz Al-Hamza from activist group Raqqas Being Slaughtered Silently. It's an anti-ISIS group. They work inside the territory of the Islamic State, work undercover to document the life under this terror group. And he was one of the first Syrians who went to Facebook and to warn of this terrorist. And I spoke with him, and he told me, you know, I came from a country that's torn apart by war and terror. I know how bad terror is. I know how bad attacks against civilians are, and I don't want it to happen here. And I don't want the country that gave me refugees to be hit by terrorists.
I have to leave it there, Björn. I'm so sorry, we're out of time. Björn Stritzel there speaking to us from Germany. Thank you. Now, police and students have been clashing at universities across South Africa for weeks as demonstrators demanding free education for all try to shut down colleges in the lead up to final exams. As Alistair Leithhead reports from Johannesburg, protest and political infighting are symptoms of what South Africa has failed to achieve 22 years after the end of apartheid.
Sign of burning out. Today in Pretoria, the country's capital, they took their demands for free education off the campus and onto the streets. The first children to be born after the end of apartheid are coming of age, and they're angry. Their scenes reminiscent of another time. Their parents fought the authorities for freedom, but this generation wants more. They're trying to shut down the universities ahead of final exams. But if students can't graduate, there are no junior doctors, no trainee teachers. The country and the economy will suffer. Well, these student demonstrations are spreading across South Africa, in Cape Town and here in Pretoria, where there were these ugly scenes on the streets. But this is more than just a demand for free university education. This is much more indicative of bigger problems in South Africa, about questions over inequality and about race. There's still much white wealth in Johannesburg's smartest suburb, which towers above the poor township of Alexandra. It's here 18-year-old law student Siasanga Matai lives with her Aunt Hazel, who brought her up when she was orphaned at 8.
At least if as students we saw that there's no money in South Africa, maybe we wouldn't be protesting like this, but because we know that there is money but it is not used appropriately, so that's why.
She just wants to go back to class. Her aunt has struggled to pay her fees despite a bursary.
I didn't expect the students to be fighting for education. So I thought everything was gonna be easy for everyone, for the poor of the poorest.
In the municipal elections,
President Jacob Zuma and his ruling African National Congress have been smeared by scandals and allegations of corruption. Freedom wasn't supposed to be like this.
People are really just saying that we don't think that that's what's being done to redress the past or to try to really build a new South Africa is adequate. And the government, instead of responding to our legitimate grievances, is ignoring us.
There's little sign of the protests fading, with more demonstrations planned across the country. This is an important time in South Africa's coming of age. Alistair Leithhead, BBC News, Johannesburg.
Now, the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump is on the campaign trail today in Florida. The crisis in the Republican Party over his candidacy is continuing after a bruising few days of senior figures in the party abandoning him after the Trump tapes revelations. He's taken to the stage to persuade voters to back him. Well, most of his speech today at the rally in Florida was spent attacking Hillary Clinton following emails released by WikiLeaks on Tuesday that appeared to show the Department of Justice communicating with the Clinton campaign over the investigation into her private email server. Here's what he had to say.
The Hillary Clinton documents, have you been seeing this, what's going on? Released by WikiLeaks, make more clear than ever just how much is at stake in November and how unattractive and dishonest our country has become. The election of Hillary Clinton would lead, in my opinion, to the almost total destruction of our country as we know it.
A look at some of the day's other news stories. In Thailand, large crowds of well-wishers have continued to pray outside the hospital in Bangkok, where King Bhumibol is dangerously ill. The palace says his condition has not yet stabilised. The Thai king is the world's longest-serving monarch, coming to the throne in 1946. The Indian Army says a 3-day standoff between soldiers and armed militants has come to an end in Indian-administered Kashmir. An Indian Army spokesman said the fighting ended when 2 militants who'd taken up positions in an empty government building close to the region's main city of Srinagar were killed. He said the building has been searched and weapons recovered. Samsung has lowered its forecast for third quarter profit by a third after Tuesday's announcement that it was stopping production of its Galaxy Note 7 phone. Safety fears have been increasing after a number of models caught fire. The South Korean company's share price fell further in the wake of the announcement. Ireland is a land rich in mythical tales about giants, and now there is a thought that those legends may be built more on fact than fiction. Scientists are working to try to identify people who are carrying what they're calling a giant gene. Researchers have found it's more commonly carried by people in County Londonderry in Northern Ireland. Our Ireland correspondent Chris Buckler reports.
These stone circles aren't the only link to history here in Mid-Ulster. This is a land of giants, and that's a title that comes not just from myths and legends. In this area, it's in the blood. Among those strolling these shopping streets are a select group of people who carry what's become known as the giant gene.
That's me when I was 7, 8 years old.
Brendan Holland is one of them. At his height, he stood almost 6 feet 11 inches tall, and it's likely he would have grown to well over 7 feet tall if he hadn't been treated for a genetic disorder that caused gigantism.
Do you object being called a giant?
No, not at all. People can call me what they like, and many's the time they have.
However, gigantism is a condition that can be life-threatening.
My mother passed it to me, and she never knew that. And many people still, to this day, are passing the gene on without knowing it, and that will continue.
DNA evidence shows Brendan is related to Charles Byrne, whose skeleton is on display in a London museum. He was more than 7.5 feet tall. Born in Mid-Ulster in the 1700s, he became famous in London as the Irish Giant. But it's only a decade since scientists worked out a genetic link to the condition, which affects the pituitary gland, causing abnormal growth and many other medical problems.
20% of people who carry the gene will develop the disease, so people could develop blindness, severe headaches, and die prematurely. But with effective therapy, I think that problem can be alleviated quite substantially. So the emphasis really is on early diagnosis and early treatment.
Irish folklore is full of tales of giants, not least Finn McCool, who it's claimed built Antrim's famous Giant's Causeway. Researchers believe in at least some of the many stories there may be a little truth. And with the gene still present in the population here, they've been carrying out tests to try to identify people who carry it. So far, they've found 15 families.
There's clearly a giant hotspot in the middle of Northern Ireland. We were surprised as well because a lot of the people we found really are no different than anybody else. They're normal height, stature and so on. But of course it's the complications that maybe 1 or 2 generations down the line in their children or grandchildren, that's what we're hoping to prevent with this.
There was probably at least some truth in the centuries of stories told about giants. But it's likely that at their heart was a gene that caused considerable pain and problems. That's why many want the idea of generations of giants to be consigned forever to history. Chris Buckler, BBC News, Mid-Ulster.
Let's return to the campaign trail in the United States. We showed you Donald Trump a few minutes ago in Florida campaigning there. Let's talk to Anthony Zerka. He's in Washington. Anthony, is the focus now really on these few essential states in the final 4 weeks?
I think that has to be. That's typical of any presidential campaign, at least in the modern era. You look at key swing states. You see Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton both in Florida. That's going to be a big one. Ohio, another. North Carolina, another. Colorado. Hillary Clinton's out in Colorado. Nevada. They'll be both there to debate next week. So, yeah, the entire map boils down to places where the margins are close. But if you look right now, Hillary Clinton is doing well in all of them. She's leading in a lot of the key swing states. She definitely has the upper hand going in these last few weeks.
Anthony, we've had President Obama asking or urging senior Republicans to withdraw their support from Donald Trump. We've had the United Nations Human Rights Chief saying the world's in danger if Donald Trump becomes president. I suppose that's not going to worry Donald Trump or his supporters unduly.
No, I don't think anyone in the UN is going to carry a lot of water among particularly Donald Trump voters here in the States. But Barack Obama, with such harsh words condemning Donald Trump, I think that's going to go a long way towards helping to activate the Democratic base. Barack Obama is very popular here in the United States right now, and his popularity is increasing month after month. He's in the high 50s as far as approval ratings right now. And when he comes out and says Donald Trump isn't qualified to work at a 7-Eleven convenience store, I mean, that's going to get the Democratic base really roused up. Early voting's already happening in Ohio, a key swing state. He wants to get them out into the polls and feeling good about the race.
Yeah, and how much controversy has been generated by this story about emails?
Well, I think a lot of people here in Washington are talking about it because it gives an interesting sort of insight into the Hillary Clinton campaign. What happened was someone hacked into a senior advisor for Hillary Clinton, and we see some of the infighting and messaging, all this back and forth about what sort of campaign strategy, maybe a cozy relationship between Hillary Clinton and the U.S. media. That'll definitely be part of Donald Trump's stump speech. He's going to try to portray Hillary Clinton as a part of the establishment that he's running against. But right now, everything's getting overwhelmed by Donald Trump's gaffes and this secret tape that was released on Friday that showed him making off-color remarks about advances on women and such. That still hasn't died down. So I don't think the email story is breaking through to a larger electorate yet.
Anthony, very briefly, we've had 2 televised debates. We're still recovering from the last one, but there is still one more to go.
Still one more. It's Wednesday in Las Vegas. Donald Trump says he's going to be there, although he's been very critical of the debate commission that's been putting him on. But all eyes will once again be on the 2 candidates on the same stage in just a week.
Anthony, thank you very much. Anthony Zurcher in Washington. Now, for fans of photography, the work of David Atty is instantly recognisable, but now nearly 35 years after his death, his photos are winning a new audience. His son has uncovered images from a shoot with Truman Capote that have never been seen before. Now they're on display at the Brooklyn Historical Society.
I started digging through these dusty wooden boxes with all my father's negatives exactly as he left them. And I found an envelope that said Holiday Capote, and I never even knew he had anything to do with Truman Capote. So it was only maybe about 12 or 14 images. Brought them back to LA, had them printed, and my jaw hit the floor. I just thought they were amazing portraits of Capote that were never published. He really liked the work my father had done for Breakfast at Tiffany's, so my guess is that it was Capote who said to Holiday magazine when he was hired to write an essay about his life in Brooklyn, let's use this guy, David Atty. And my father spent a day with Capote. He did these incredible portraits of him in the house that he lived in Brooklyn Heights. And then Capote, for the rest of that day, led him around Brooklyn Heights and showed him people and places that he liked to go. You know, and Holiday only used 4 pictures from the shoot, which were all just kind of images of people on the street in Brooklyn Heights. They didn't use any pictures of Capote, who wasn't super famous at the time. And then it was all just stuck in envelopes and shoved in a closet. Even though that essay has been reprinted tons of times over the years, the photographs were kind of just gone. I really felt they were pictures of Brooklyn taken by someone who knew and cared about Brooklyn. Brooklyn captured by a son of Brooklyn, and there's a real tenderness in the point of view, and the way he shows the children playing on the street and old couples standing on stoops and guys gathering outside a civic club. It's a very affectionate portrait of that time. There's nothing voyeuristic about it. You get the sense that there was some interaction between my father and those subjects that was a warm one. And I think he brought a lot of himself and his connection to people, and he was a very outgoing, warm, social person. I think he brought that to his work. I think he was trying to do photo montages and these kinds of doctored images that may have been a little more cutting edge at the time, but I don't think he trusted his eye as a straight narrative photographer, and that work is being seen now and appreciated. I feel like I understand his creative process. I feel like I understand his sort of frailties in a way that I never could have thought about as a kid. What's so great about the Brooklyn Historical Society show is it doesn't just have vintage prints of my father's and a whole bunch of these newly discovered and newly printed images. It also treats it as the historic body of work that I think it is. You know, it all started with a Google search where very little popped up on him, and I just felt he was a great artist and somebody I cared about and still do, and I just wanted people to see his work and love it and think he was great.
Finally, some news in the last hour or so. A film production company has been fined $2 million for an accident in which the Hollywood star Harrison Ford was crushed by a metal door on the set of Star Wars The Force Awakens. The incident happened 2 years ago during rehearsals at Pinewood Studios in Buckinghamshire in the UK. He was struck by a metal door, and Harrison Ford, as a result, broke his leg on set. And don't forget, you can get in touch with me and some of the team on Twitter. I'm at KarinBBC. We also have a Facebook page too. Thanks very much for watching. I'm Karin Giannone here in London.